My name is Helen, and I'm 39 years old. For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around one person, my son, Daniel. I raised him on my own after his father walked away when Daniel was just a baby. At first, I thought the absence of a father would crush him, so I made a vow. I would work harder, love deeper, and sacrifice everything I could so Daniel would never feel the emptiness of abandonment. The years passed, and my sacrifices piled higher than I cared to admit. I gave up promotions at work, turned down invitations to dates, and even distanced myself from friends, all so I could dedicate myself to Daniel. If there was ever a choice between my needs and his, he won without question. And for a long time, I didn't regret it. Daniel grew up surrounded by love, but also by comfort. The kind of comfort that quietly corrodes gratitude. I never wanted him to feel the sting of poverty or rejection, so I shielded him from both. Every time he wanted something, I made it happen, even if it meant working late nights or quietly skipping meals myself. I thought love meant giving endlessly, never letting him see the cracks in my world. But as Daniel entered his teenage years, I noticed a change. His tone shifted when he spoke to me, often dripping with irritation, as if I were a burden rather than his mother. At first, I brushed it off as normal teenage rebellion, but the sharpness in his words grew. The dismissive glances, the rolling eyes, the way he brushed past me in the hallway, it all cut deeper than I admitted. Still, I told myself this was temporary. He would mature. He would grow into the young man I had dreamed of raising. All I had to do was endure the rough patch. But the rough patch never ended. Instead, the boy I had sacrificed everything for became someone I barely recognized. He stopped thanking me for meals, stopped noticing the clean laundry folded neatly on his bed, and stopped caring whether I came home exhausted from double shifts. He began speaking to me as though I owed him everything. And then, one evening, it happened. We had argued before about his grades, his late nights, his endless demands, but this time was different. The anger in his voice was sharper, more final. His face twisted with frustration as he shouted words that would haunt me long after they left his lips. "We don't need you!" For a moment, the world stopped. My ears rang, my chest tightened, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I stared at him, searching for a flicker of regret in his eyes, but all I saw was defiance. My son, the boy I had built my entire life around, had just erased me with 6 careless words. I wanted to scream back, to remind him of the countless nights I stayed up, to rock him back to sleep. The sacrifices I made so he could wear new shoes while I patched up my own. But I didn't. Instead, something inside me shifted. His words, though cruel, didn't destroy me. They revealed something I had been blind to for years. Daniel had never truly understood the value of what I gave him. He believed comfort was a birthright, not a privilege. As I stood there, watching him storm off, I made a decision. If Daniel believed he didn't need me, then I would let him live that belief. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't argue. I would simply step back and let the world show him what my presence had protected him from. I would take away the invisible net that had always caught him, the quiet labor that made his life so easy. I would let him see what life without me truly meant. What Daniel didn't realize was that his words had just unlocked a storm he couldn't stop. He thought he was invincible, untouchable, because I had always made sure he never faced the real world. Daniel had grown up in a world where every burden was carried on my shoulders, not his. He had no idea what it cost to keep the lights on, to keep food stocked in, the fridge, or to make sure his tuition was always paid on time. To him, life was just smooth. Problems never lasted more than a day because I fixed them before they reached him. He strutted around as though the universe owed him ease. He'd invite friends over, blasting music, laughing loudly while I hid in my room after long shifts. He never once noticed how my hands ached from scrubbing or how my back throbbed from working double hours at the hospital. Instead, he complained about Wi Fi being too slow or his favorite sneakers being out of stock. I had protected him so fiercely that I had unknowingly built a prison for myself and a palace for him. Every time he demanded something, I convinced myself it was love to provide it. When he wanted a new phone, I worked weekends to afford it. When he demanded the latest gaming console, I said yes, even if it meant skipping groceries for a week. And yet, in return, I was told I was too controlling. His definition of control? Me asking him to clean his room, to come home on time, or to respect curfews. Things any reasonable parent would say. But in his eyes, I was an obstacle in his endless pursuit of comfort. I began to notice how unbalanced our lives had become. I poured everything into him, while he poured only complaints back at me. Still, I kept quiet. Still, I told myself, he's just young. He'll learn. But after the night he told me he didn't need me, something snapped. For years, I had been the invisible scaffolding holding his world together. Rent, groceries, the very roof above his head. All of it existed because of me. If he truly believed he didn't need me, then it was time for him to see what life looked like without my constant hand propping him up. I didn't act rashly. I knew Daniel's arrogance was strong, and the only way to break it was slowly, piece by piece. My love for him hadn't disappeared. It had simply shifted into a harder kind of love, one that chose lessons over luxuries. So, I began to plan. Quietly, carefully, I started pulling back. First, with money. He didn't know I had been covering his apartment rent in full. He thought scholarships and odd jobs magically handled it. The truth was, I'd been the safety net all along. Without warning him, I stopped paying. When the first late notice arrived, I watched from the kitchen window as he opened the envelope on the porch. His smirk faded. His confidence cracked just slightly. He marched inside, waving the letter at me as though I had orchestrated some betrayal. "What's this? Why is the rent overdue?" he demanded. I looked him in the eye and answered calmly, "If you don't need me, Daniel, then you don't need my help." He exploded, his voice rising, his hands flailing. "Are you serious? You can't just stop. You've been paying it all this time, and now you want to ruin me?" I didn't flinch. "I've been carrying you, Daniel. You said you didn't need me. So now I'm giving you the chance to prove it." The rage in his face was almost comical. He wasn't used to resistance. He wasn't used to reality clawing at his perfect little bubble. He accused me of betrayal, of cruelty. But I stayed silent, my arms folded, my heart breaking in secret. Within weeks, he was scrambling. His so-called friends, the ones who once cheered him for his carefree lifestyle, vanished when he couldn't throw parties anymore. The late fees piled higher. His complaints grew louder, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across his face. The boy who had once told me he didn't need me was finally discovering what my absence felt like. And while it hurt to watch him stumble, I knew this was the only way forward. Because Daniel had lived in a world built by my sacrifices. And now, that world was slowly crumbling. And when the money disappeared, Daniel's perfect little world began to crack. The fridge was empty, and suddenly, so was his pride. The first time Daniel opened the refrigerator and found nothing but a half-empty carton of milk, he looked around the kitchen as though the food might be hiding from him. He pulled open cabinets, slamming doors one after another, his frustration growing with every empty shelf. Finally, he turned to me, his voice sharp and incredulous. "Where's the food?" he demanded. I didn't flinch. "The same place it always comes from, Daniel. The store. But you'll have to go there yourself now." His jaw dropped. "What do you mean? You always—" He stopped himself, realizing what he was admitting. For his entire life, Meals had appeared on the table, as if by magic. He had never once asked himself where they came from. I watched him wrestle with the realization that even something as simple as a stocked fridge wasn't guaranteed. It was a luxury one I had always provided quietly, without praise. At first, he tried to brush it off. He ordered takeout, burning through what little money he had left. When that ran out, he raided the pantry, living off stale cereal and canned beans. But within days, his complaints grew louder. "This is ridiculous," he snapped one evening, holding up a box of pasta with disdain. "You're really just gonna let me starve?" I met his glare with calm resolve. "If you're hungry, you know what to do. The grocery store is open. Or you could cook." His laugh was hollow, almost mocking. "I don't cook. That's your job." I raised an eyebrow. Not anymore. The arrogance in his voice clashed against the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Eventually, his pride cracked. I watched from the doorway as he attempted to boil pasta, glaring at the pot as though it had betrayed him. Minutes later, the acrid smell of smoke filled the kitchen he had forgotten to stir, and the noodles fused into a sticky, burnt lump. He cursed, slamming the pot into the sink. "This is impossible." I wanted to smile, but my heart ached instead. He wasn't a child anymore, yet in so many ways, he was helpless. All those years, I thought I was protecting him. I had only robbed him of the skills he needed to survive. The following days were an endless cycle of small humiliations. He overcooked rice until it was mush. He undercooked chicken, gagging at the taste. He spent hours watching online tutorials, pausing, rewinding, trying to mimic what came so easily to others. His frustration boiled over constantly, and each outburst was followed by silence, an uncomfortable silence that told me he was realizing just how much he had taken for granted. There was one night I'll never forget. I had cooked a simple meal for myself, grilled vegetables and chicken. I sat at the table, eating quietly, while Daniel hovered nearby, his stomach growling audibly. Finally, he broke the silence. "Can I have some?" His voice was smaller than usual, stripped of arrogance. I looked up. "Number, you said you don't need me, so feed yourself." The flicker of shame in his eyes nearly broke me. He turned away, muttering under his breath, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he retreated to the kitchen, pulling out a frying pan with clumsy determination. I watched in silence as he tried again. The food wasn't good, but he ate every bite. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: humility. But humility wasn't enough. Hunger had only scratched the surface of what he needed to learn. Because Daniel's independence wasn't just about food, it was about freedom. And soon, even that would be taken away. And then came the night he discovered what else I had taken away. The car keys weren't in their usual place, and neither was his freedom. For Daniel, the car had always been more than transportation. It was his lifeline, his symbol of freedom. He never asked where the money for gas, insurance, or repairs came from. He never questioned how a teenager with no steady job and could afford to drive wherever he pleased. He simply assumed it was his right. But the night he reached for the keys and found the hook by the door empty, panic flashed across his face. He searched the counter, the coffee table, even my purse, his voice rising with every passing second. "Where are the keys?" he demanded. I looked up from my book, keeping my tone steady. "There are no keys, Daniel." "What do you mean there are no keys? They were right here yesterday." I closed the book slowly, meeting his furious eyes. I sold the car. The silence that followed was deafening. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, his voice cracked with disbelief. You sold my car?" I shook my head. "It was never your car, Daniel. It was mine. I bought it, I maintained it, and I paid for every drop of gas that went into it. You just drove it." His face reddened, anger bubbling up like lava. "You can't do this. I need that car. How am I supposed to get anywhere? How am I supposed to live?" I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "You told me you didn't need me. That car was me. Every ride, every late night pickup, every gas tank filled, it was me. And now, it's gone. He exploded, pacing the living room, pulling at his hair in frustration. This is insane. How am I supposed to get to work? How am I supposed to see my friends? His words hung in the air, bitter and desperate. The truth was, he didn't care about work. He cared about his freedom, his image, his ability to escape responsibility with the turn of a key. At first, he tried to rely on friends, calling them for rides. But soon, those friends grew tired of being his chauffeurs, especially when he had no gas money to offer. He tried public transportation, but the schedules frustrated him, the crowds overwhelmed him, and the waiting made him feel trapped. For a boy who once moved through the city with reckless independence, he now felt caged, bound by walls he had never noticed before. And though his anger burned bright, I could see the shift happening. Every slammed door, every muttered insult was less about me and more about the reality closing in on him. For the first time, he was learning what freedom truly cost and how quickly it vanished without effort to maintain it. Late one night, I heard him on the phone, his voice low and strained. "No, man, I can't come. I don't have the car anymore. No, I don't know when I'll get it back." A pause, then quieter. "Yeah, I know. It sucks." He hung up and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the floor. I didn't disturb him. I wanted him to feel the weight of that moment, the realization that without me, without the privileges I had silently provided, his world was smaller, harder, and lonelier. Selling the car wasn't just about money. It was about stripping away the illusion of independence he had clung to so tightly. It was about showing him that everything he thought was his had been borrowed from me. But even as I watched his arrogance crumble, I knew this wasn't enough. He still had the roof over his head, the one place he could retreat when the world became too heavy. And as long as he had that, he would never truly understand the depth of what I had given him. Because soon, even the walls around him would stop protecting him. The roof over his head was the last illusion I was about to shatter. For weeks, Daniel sulked around the house like a caged animal. With no car, his world felt unbearably small. He complained constantly, threw sharp words at me whenever frustration boiled over, but underneath it all, I could see something new creeping in fear. He had always believed the house was permanent, unshakable. No matter how many storms we weathered, no matter how many arguments flared, he thought the roof above him would always stay. He didn't know that even this sanctuary had been sustained by my sacrifices. And he was about to learn that nothing in life, nothing was guaranteed. One evening, while he sat sulking on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a scowl, I sat beside him with a stack of papers. "Daniel," I began, my voice calm but unwavering. "I've sold the house." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "You... what?" "I've sold it," I repeated, sliding the papers across the table. "The listing went through. The new owners take possession in 6 weeks." For a moment, he just stared at me, waiting for the punchline, waiting for me to laugh and tell him it was a joke. But my expression didn't change. "You can't do that," he finally shouted, leaping to his feet. "This is our home, my home." I shook my head slowly. "It's my home, Daniel. I paid for it. I kept the lights on, the water running, the roof from leaking. You lived here, but you never maintained it. And now, I'm choosing to let it go." He was furious, pacing the room like a trapped wolf. "You're ruining my life. Do you even hear yourself? First the money, then the food, then the car, and now this? What's wrong with you?" The words stung, but I didn't let them pierce me. "What's wrong," I said firmly, "is that I've let you believe the world would always bend for you. It won't, Daniel. It never has. I bent for you, and you spat on it." His anger cracked into fear. His voice dropped. almost a whisper. So, what happens to me? I folded my hands, steadying my voice. You'll figure it out. You'll find a place. You'll learn what it means to build your own home instead of living in one someone else sacrificed for. Tears of rage pooled in his eyes. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I sat in the silence that followed, my chest heavy but resolute. This wasn't cruelty, it was survival. If I didn't force him to stand on his own, he never would. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of his false security. He tried to stay with friends, but couches only stayed open for so long. Friends who once praised his independence grew tired of his needs. One by one, doors closed on him. He begged me to reconsider, his voice cracking with desperation. Please, Mom, don't do this. I'll change, I promise. Just let us keep the house. But I stayed firm. A home isn't just walls and a roof, Daniel. It's responsibility. And until you learn that, you don't deserve this house. The moving day arrived faster than either of us expected. As I packed my things, Daniel sat in the corner, pale and silent, watching the life he thought was untouchable collapse into boxes. For the first time, he looked small, not arrogant, not loud, but small. I moved into a modest apartment, simple and quiet. He didn't follow. Pride kept him from asking to stay with me. Instead, he scrambled, bouncing from friend to friend, never settling, always restless. And though it tore me apart to know my son was drifting through uncertainty, I also knew something vital was happening. The boy who once screamed, "We don't need you," was finally facing the reality of life without me. And in his lowest moment, desperation pushed him into a dangerous choice. When the easy road vanished, he searched for shortcuts. Without money, without food, without a car, and now, without a roof over his head, Daniel's arrogance had been chipped away piece by piece. But instead of humbling himself fully and embracing responsibility, his desperation pushed him in a darker direction. At first, he tried patchwork solutions. He picked up odd jobs here and there, washing dishes, delivering flyers, helping a neighbor move furniture, but the money slipped through his fingers before he could even breathe. Rent for a tiny room? Impossible. Bills? Laughable. He was barely surviving, and each day added a new weight to his shoulders. And then came the wrong kind of people, the ones who promised fast cash with no strings attached. He had always been drawn to the loudest voices in the room, the ones who wore confidence like armor. So when a group of old acquaintances offered him opportunities that sounded too easy to be true, Daniel didn't hesitate. They whispered about quick schemes reselling stolen goods, running errands for people with shady reputations. Nothing serious, they assured him. Just small things. To someone drowning, even poisoned water looks like salvation. I didn't know at first. To me, Daniel just looked more exhausted, his eyes sunken, his words clipped. He avoided me, avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversations, as though afraid I'd see through him. But I noticed the subtle changes. The new clothes he couldn't possibly afford. The late nights where he came home reeking of sweat and smoke. The way his hands trembled when he thought I wasn't looking. I wanted to grab him, to shake him, to scream. Don't go down this path. Don't make this worse. But if I swooped in now, if I saved him from himself again, every lesson I had carved into his life would crumble. He had to feel the consequences not of my choices, but of his. One night, I overheard him arguing on the phone. His voice was low but urgent. "I told you I'll get it. Just give me more time." "No, I'm not backing out. Relax." I said I'll handle it. My stomach dropped. I didn't need the details. I knew trouble when I heard it. For days, I wrestled with myself. Had I pushed him too far? Had my tough love driven him into the arms of dangerous people? The guilt gnawed at me, whispering that maybe I had made a mistake. But then the other voice inside me reminded me, this is his choice, his path, his responsibility. Daniel was changing, though. Beneath the desperation, I saw flickers of humility. He stopped bragging. He stopped demanding. His words grew softer, almost careful, as though life had finally taught him to respect silence. But still, he refused to admit he needed help. Pride clung to him like chains, dragging him deeper. And then, just when I thought I couldn't worry more, the phone rang late one night. A number I didn't recognize. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The voice on the other end made my blood run cold. It wasn't Daniel. It was the police. They told me he had been picked up with a group of boys suspected of petty theft. Not arrested yet, but his name was in the report. My son's name? Tied to a crime. When I hung up the phone, I sat in the dark, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every instinct screamed at me to go to him, to pull him back, to shield him. But I forced myself to stay still. If he didn't feel the fire now, he would walk into a blaze one day. When Daniel came home that night, his face pale, his shoulders slumped, I didn't lecture. I didn't scream. I simply looked at him. And for the first time, I saw a true fear in his eyes. The boy who thought he was invincible had finally realized he wasn't, because Daniel's shortcuts had landed him in real danger. When the police showed up at my door, I realized the storm had truly hit. It was a rainy Thursday evening when the knock came. Sharp, deliberate, authoritative, the kind of knock that makes your chest tighten before you even open the door. I dried my hands on a towel and pulled it open. Two officers stood on the porch, their uniforms damp with rain. "Are you Helen Carter?" one of them asked. My stomach dropped. "Yes," I whispered. "We need to talk to you about your son, Daniel." Those words pierced deeper than any insult, deeper than any late notice or slammed door. My knees nearly buckled, but I forced myself to stay upright, to listen. They explained that Daniel had been picked up with a group of boys caught stealing electronics from a local store. He hadn't been the one caught with stolen goods in hand, but he was there, present, involved enough for his name to be recorded, his reputation to be stained. They weren't pressing charges for now, but they wanted me to know, to warn him. As the officers left, their words echoed in my head like thunder. For now. When Daniel came home later that night, his clothes damp from the rain, his face pale and drawn, I didn't need to ask. I saw it in his eyes. The fear, the shame, the silent admission that he had fallen further than he ever intended. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. For a long time, the only sound was his ragged breathing. Finally, his voice broke the silence, soft and trembling. "I didn't steal anything, Mom. I swear I didn't. But I was there. I thought it was just messing around. I didn't think." His voice cracked, and he pressed his palms harder into his eyes. I didn't think it would get this far. I stood across from him, arms folded tightly, my heart a war zone. Every instinct screamed at me to comfort him, to pull him close and tell him it would be okay. But another voice, the harder, wiser voice, reminded me that comfort had been his undoing all these years. "You said you didn't need me," I said quietly. "But look where that belief has brought you." He flinched, as though my words struck him physically. Tears slipped through his fingers, dripping onto the table. "I know. I messed up. I'm scared, Mom." Hearing him say those words nearly undid me. My son, who once stood tall with arrogance, was now hunched and trembling like a child. But I didn't let my voice waver. "This is what happens when you look for shortcuts," I said firmly. "The easy way always costs the most." For the first time in years, he didn't argue. He didn't yell or blame me. He just sat there, broken and silent, his tears soaking into his sleeves. That night, he barely slept. I heard him pacing his room, muttering to himself, restless. Every creak of the floorboards was a reminder of his unraveling. He was trapped in his own thoughts, haunted by the possibility of losing everything. And though I wanted desperately to ease his fear, I knew this was the fire that might finally forge him into something stronger. He needed to sit with his mistakes. He needed to feel the weight of the path he had chosen. The next morning, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Mom, he said, avoiding my eyes. I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't want to ruin everything. It wasn't a full apology, not yet, but it was the first crack in his pride. The first sign that maybe, just maybe, he was ready to change. But the real breaking moment didn't come from the law, it came from within our family. It was his grandmother's disappointment that cut deeper than any punishment. A week after the police incident, my mother, Daniel's grandmother, came to visit. She had always been a steady force in our family, a woman of quiet strength whose words carried weight. Daniel adored her when he was younger, always running into her arms when she visited, always seeking her approval. But as he grew older and his arrogance blossomed, even her gentle presence had been brushed aside. That day, though, he couldn't brush her aside. She sat at the kitchen table, her posture straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Daniel shuffled in, his shoulders hunched, his eyes avoiding hers. He looked like a boy again, stripped of the bravado he usually wore like armor. Daniel, she began, her voice calm but firm, do you know why I'm here? He swallowed hard. Because of the police. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Because of the choices you've made. Choices that shame not only you, but this family. Daniel's head dropped lower. I stood in the doorway, watching silently, as my mother took control of the moment, in a way only she could. When your grandfather was your age, she continued, her tone steady. He worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. He didn't complain. He didn't make excuses. And your mother, she glanced at me, then back at Daniel, sacrificed her entire life to raise you. She gave you everything she never had. And how do you repay her? By throwing her sacrifices back at her as if they mean nothing. Daniel's lips trembled. I didn't mean, she cut him off sharply. You did mean it. You said it. You lived it. You took and never gave back. And now, look at you, caught with thieves, reduced to begging for scraps. Is this the man you wanted to become? Is this what you want your name to mean? Tears welled in his eyes. He shook his head quickly, his voice cracking. No, I don't. I don't want this. I didn't think it would. I didn't think. That's the problem, she said, her voice softer now, but laced with disappointment. You never thought. You never considered the hands that fed you, the back that bent for you, the heart that bled for you. And now, you're standing on the edge of ruining everything, not just for yourself, but for the woman who carried you. Daniel's tears spilled over then, rolling down his cheeks unchecked. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't. His words dissolved into sobs. My mother reached across the table, her hand resting gently but firmly on his. Sorry means nothing without change, Daniel. Words are wind. What matters is what you do next. Will you keep destroying yourself? Or will you rise and honor the sacrifices made for you? For a long moment, the only sound was his crying. And then, finally, he nodded, choking on the words. I want to change. I don't want to be this person anymore. Standing in the doorway, my heart broke and healed all at once. I had waited years to hear those words, to see that crack of humility shine through. But I also knew better than to trust promises too easily. Words, as my mother said, were wind. Daniel had spoken apologies before, but they had always been hollow, followed by the same selfish actions. This time, it had to be different. This time, I needed to see it in his choices, not just his tears. Still, watching him crumble under the weight of his grandmother's disappointment, I knew something had shifted. He wasn't just scared anymore, he was ashamed. And shame, painful as it was, could be the spark that lit the fire of change. And soon, an unexpected opportunity forced him to prove whether he had truly changed. Sometimes life tests us when we least expect it. and Daniel's test arrived with a single phone call. It happened on a quiet morning. The air was still, the kind of silence that settles after a storm. I was sipping my coffee when the phone rang. On the other end was a family friend, Mr. Harper, who owned a small hardware store in town. "Helen," he said, his voice kind but cautious. "I've been hearing about Daniel, and I know things have been rough. I can't promise much, but I have an opening here. It's just stocking shelves, cleaning, and helping customers carry things out to their cars. Minimum wage, long hours, but it's honest work. If he's willing, the job is his." I thanked him quietly, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to decline on Daniel's behalf, afraid of watching him fail again. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew this was the exact lifeline he needed. Not a gift, not a bailout, but an opportunity to earn. When I told Daniel, his reaction was immediate. His face twisted with reluctance, almost disgust. Stocking shelves? Cleaning floors? Mom, come on. That's beneath me. I met his gaze firmly. What's beneath you is stealing. What's beneath you is living off others while giving nothing back. Honest work, no matter how small, will never be beneath you. If you want to prove you're ready to change, this is where you start. He argued, of course. He complained about the pay, the hours, the humiliation of working in a store where people might recognize him. But something about his grandmother's words still lingered, because after a long silence, he finally muttered, "Fine, I'll do it." The first week nearly broke him. He came home sore, his hands blistered from lifting heavy boxes. His clothes smelled of dust and sweat. His back ached from bending and hauling. Every morning he groaned, dragging himself out of bed like a soldier marching into battle. But slowly, painfully slowly, something shifted. One evening, he dropped his first paycheck onto the table in front of me. It wasn't much, just a modest sum. But the look on his face stopped me cold. It wasn't arrogance, or entitlement, or even shame. It was pride. Quiet, genuine pride. "I earned this," he said simply. And for the first time, I believed him. From then on, I noticed small changes. He stopped asking me for money. He started paying for his own meals, even bringing home groceries now and then. When the electricity bill arrived, he pulled a few crumpled bills from his wallet and pressed them into my hand. "Here, I should help." The gestures were small, almost symbolic, but to me, they meant everything. For years, he had drained me dry without a second thought. Now, he was truly trying to give back. Still, I was cautious. I'd seen him promise change before, only to slip back into old habits once the sting of consequences wore off. I didn't want to believe too quickly. I needed to see consistency, not just bursts of effort. But one night, as I watched him collapse onto the couch after another long day, his face pale with exhaustion, I realized this wasn't the same boy who once shouted he didn't need me. This was someone different, someone being forged by struggle. I wanted to believe this was the turning point. I wanted to believe the storm had passed. But life has a way of testing change, of pulling old demons back into the light. And soon, Daniel's resolve would be challenged in a way that would prove whether this transformation was real or just another fleeting moment. Her doubts only deepened when the past came knocking again. Old habits have sharp claws, they don't let go easily. For a while, things seemed to steady. Daniel worked his shifts, came home tired but calmer, and even helped with small chores around the apartment. It was strange seeing him like this quiet, almost humble, but I knew better than to think the journey was over. Change doesn't happen in a straight line. Old habits lurk in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to pounce. And soon enough, they did. It started with a knock at the door one Friday night. When I opened it, two of Daniel's old friends stood there, grinning like they owned the world. Boys who had vanished the second his money dried up. Boys who had cheered him on when he was reckless, but never lifted a hand to help when he fell. Yo, Danny! Come on, we're heading out, one of them said, his voice dripping with the same false confidence Daniel once wore. Daniel hesitated, glancing at me before stepping outside. I stayed near the window, watching as they laughed, slapped him on the back, and dangled promises of easy fun. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. I knew that tone. I knew the temptation they carried. For the next few days, Daniel grew restless again. His phone buzzed late at night. He lingered by the door, torn between two worlds, the hard-earned stability he was building and the reckless thrill of his old life. One night, I finally asked him outright, "Are you going back to them?" His jaw tightened. "They're my friends, Mom. They've always been there." I stared at him. "Were they there when you couldn't pay rent? When you couldn't eat? When the police knocked on our door?" He looked away, his silence heavy with truth. The pull of the past was strong, though. He left one evening with them, his head high, as if daring me to stop him. I didn't. I let him walk out the door, my heart pounding, praying he wouldn't fall again. Hours later, he came back, alone, his shoulders slumped, his face pale, his eyes haunted. He didn't say a word. He just walked past me, straight to his room, and shut the door. The next morning, over a quiet breakfast, he finally spoke. "They wanted me to do something. Something I shouldn't." His voice cracked. "I almost said yes. But then I thought about you, about Grandma, about everything I've already messed up." And I walked away. Tears burned in my eyes, though I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "That was the first real choice you've made for yourself, Daniel. Not for pride, not for comfort, not for appearances for yourself." He nodded slowly, his hands trembling as he lifted his coffee. "I don't want to be that guy anymore. I don't want to ruin my life." It was the first time I truly believed him, not because of his words, but because of his actions. Walking away from them, the very people who once fed his arrogance, wasn't easy. But he did it. I knew the road ahead was still long, that temptation would always lurk in the corners of his life. But for the first time, Daniel had proven he was capable of resisting it. And in that moment, I allowed myself a fragile hope. And then, the moment of truth came in the form of one final sacrifice. It was the first time Daniel chose me over himself. Life has a way of striking when you least expect it. After months of holding everything together, my body finally gave out. One morning, as I stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast, a wave of dizziness crashed over me. My vision blurred, my knees buckled, and before I knew it, I was on the floor. Daniel was the one who found me. He rushed to my side, his voice frantic, shaking me gently. "Mom? Mom? Can you hear me?" I could hear him, but my body felt heavy, unresponsive. The world swayed around me. He dialed for help, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. That night, the doctor explained it was exhaustion, stress, and neglect of my own health. Years of overworking, of sacrificing my needs for his, had finally taken their toll. As I lay in bed, weak and drained, I expected Daniel to retreat into his old patterns, to complain, to avoid, to disappear when things became difficult. But instead, something remarkable happened. He stepped up. The very next morning, he was in the kitchen, fumbling with pots and pans. The smell of burnt eggs filled the air, but when he brought the plate to me, his eyes were wide with hope. "It's not great, but it's food." I smiled weakly, accepting the plate. It wasn't about the taste, it was about the effort. Over the next few weeks, Daniel transformed before my eyes. He cooked meals, cleaned the apartment, ran errands, and even handled bills without being asked. When the medicine ran low, he worked an extra shift to buy more. When the laundry piled up, he washed it late into the night. There were no complaints, no grumbles, no rolling eyes, just quiet determination. One evening, as he sat by my bed, exhausted from work, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. I didn't get it before, Mom. I didn't understand what it meant to take care of someone. But I do now, and I'm sorry. For everything. His voice cracked, but his actions had already spoken louder than any words could. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't taking from me. He was giving. The reversal of roles was surreal. I, the mother who had carried him through every storm, was now being carried by him. And though my body ached, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I realized then that the boy who once shouted, "We don't need you," was gone. In his place was a young man, finally beginning to understand love, sacrifice, and responsibility. But even with all the progress he had made, there was one more step he had yet to take. One more moment that would determine whether this transformation was real. And it arrived the day Daniel looked me in the eyes and asked for forgiveness. The boy who once shouted, "We don't need you," was now on his knees, trembling. It happened on a quiet Sunday evening. I was sitting in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. My strength was slowly returning, but my body still carried the weight of exhaustion. Daniel had just come home from another long shift at the hardware store, his shirt damp with sweat, his face tired. He set his bag down, lingered for a moment, and then, without a word, dropped to his knees in front of me. I froze. "Daniel, what are you?" His voice broke before I could finish. "I can't carry this anymore, Mom. I can't keep pretending like I didn't hurt you, like I didn't destroy everything you gave me." His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the couch. Tears spilled down his face, raw and unrestrained. My heart clenched. The boy who once stood so tall with arrogance, who sneered at my sacrifices, who screamed that he didn't need me, was now broken, trembling, begging. "I was horrible to you," he sobbed. "I said things I can't take back. I treated you like you were nothing, like everything you did for me didn't matter. And you," his voice cracked harder, "you almost died because of me, because I drained you until there was nothing left. And still, you didn't give up on me. You let me fall, but you didn't abandon me, and I don't deserve you." Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him into my arms, but I forced myself to stay still and listen. "I don't know how to make it right," he continued, his voice hoarse. "But I need you to forgive me. Please, Mom, please. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. Just don't give up on me." The living room fell silent, save for his sobs. The boy who once demanded everything from me was now begging for the one thing he couldn't buy, couldn't fake, couldn't manipulate my forgiveness. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Daniel, do you know what those words did to me? When you shouted that you didn't need me, it felt like my entire life meant nothing. Everything I gave up, everything I sacrificed, it was as if you erased it with 6 words: 'You broke me.'" He looked up at me then, his face streaked with tears, his expression raw with regret. "I know, and I hate myself for it. If I could go back and take it all back, I would, but I can't. All I can do now is change. Please, let me prove it to you." The dam I had built inside me finally cracked. I reached down, cupping his face in my hands, my tears falling onto his skin. "Daniel, I never stopped loving you. Even when you hurt me. Even when you broke me, I never stopped. But love without respect is empty. And now you're finally showing me respect." He buried his face against me, his arms wrapping around my waist, clinging as though he feared I might vanish. I held him, my heart breaking and healing all at once. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, not the tears, not the pain, but the sincerity. The boy I thought I'd lost had finally returned, humbled, grown, and desperately human. Forgiveness wouldn't erase the past. It wouldn't undo the wounds. But it was a beginning. And as I held my son that night, I knew we had finally reached the place where rebuilding could truly begin. And with time, something beautiful began to grow again. The greatest revenge isn't punishment, it's transformation. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter. Not perfect, never perfect, but different. Daniel kept working at the hardware store, sometimes even picking up extra shifts. He came home tired, but no longer with bitterness. Instead, there was a quiet sense of purpose about him. For the first time, I didn't have to remind him to take responsibility. He took it on himself. He'd slip grocery bags onto the counter without a word, or cover the electricity bill when he could. They weren't grand gestures, but they were steady, and they meant more than he realized. I began to notice small, subtle changes in him. He no longer walked with arrogance, but with humility. He no longer demanded, but offered. When I asked him for help, he didn't roll his eyes or sigh in frustration, he simply did it. It was as though the storm he had been forced to weather had stripped away the boy he once was, leaving behind someone entirely new. One night, as we sat at the table together over a simple dinner, Daniel looked at me and said softly, "I don't ever want to be the person I was. The one who shouted that I didn't need you. I don't ever want to make you feel that way again." I studied him, seeing not just the boy I had raised, but the man he was becoming. His eyes held sincerity I had once thought impossible. For years, I had carried the fear that he would never change, that all my sacrifices had been wasted. But in that moment, I saw the truth. Change had come, not through lectures or handouts, but through struggle, loss, and hard-earned lessons. And I realized something else, something I had never admitted before. The transformation wasn't just his, it was mine too. For years, I believed love meant giving everything, sacrificing myself completely. But in letting go, in stepping back, I had reclaimed pieces of myself I had forgotten existed. I was no longer the mother who bent until she broke. I was the mother who demanded respect, who chose not just her child, but herself. And that choice had saved us both. Daniel still stumbled, of course. There were days when frustration got the better of him, when he sighed too, heavily, when he complained about work. But the difference was clear: he always got back up. He didn't retreat into arrogance or entitlement. He faced the struggle head on, and that was enough. Over time, our relationship grew not out of dependency, but out of mutual respect. We laughed more, we argued less, and when we did disagree, it no longer felt like war, it felt like conversation. Looking back now, I see it clearly. The night Daniel shouted, "We don't need you," I thought I had lost him forever. I thought those words had erased everything I had poured into him. But in truth, those words were the catalyst. They forced me to stop enabling him, to let him stumble, to let him feel the absence of everything I once gave so freely. And in that absence, he found himself. The boy who once believed he was untouchable had been humbled. The son who once believed love meant endless sacrifice now understood the cost of it. And the mother who once gave everything without question had learned the power of stepping back. Because sometimes, the only way to save someone is to let them feel what it's like to lose you.